My name is Bella. I'm 34 years old, a lab technician working at a private medical center in Oregon. My day starts at 6 a.m. I drop off my 6-year-old daughter Ellie at the elementary school near our house, then head to the lab to face trays of blood, urine, and nameless analysis forms. It's not a glamorous job, but I love it, because I see my value in precision, quiet diligence, and consistency. Ellie is the one thing I'm most proud of in my life. She has her father's soft brown curls and my green eyes, always full of light. Every afternoon after work, I try to pick her up myself instead of letting the school bus bring her home. That moment, when she runs to me, arms wide, eager to show me a drawing or a new song from music class, is when I feel most like a mother. My husband, Dean, used to be the man I believed was my soulmate. He works in real estate, often traveling to oversee new housing developments in distant suburbs. Dean used to be gentle, warm, and driven, but lately I've felt him pulling away. He's been coming home late, blaming last-minute client meetings on weekends we could have spent together as a family. Every time Ellie runs to him with a picture, he just nods absent-mindedly and looks back at his phone. Sometimes I feel like I'm just the maid in my own home. My parents, Walter and Nora, live just about a 20-minute drive away. They're retired now, living in a cabin by Crescent Lake. I've always believed their love for Ellie was genuine. They'd bake cookies, turn on cartoons, and sit for hours listening to her school stories. But recently, something has shifted in the way my mom looks at Ellie. It's not exactly cold, but cautious, like Ellie is something she'd rather not touch. My older sister, Vanessa, is the complete opposite. She's 5 years older than me, was prom queen in high school, and now works as a marketing director for a major cosmetics company in Seattle. Vanessa never married, has no children, and often jokes that I live like an old lady. Still, she never misses a family dinner, always dressed to impress, casually talking about her business trips to Paris or Milan like it's no big deal. 2 weeks ago at dinner, just as we were gathering around Dad's grilled ribs, Vanessa made a strange suggestion. Have you ever thought Ellie might do better somewhere else? Like Seattle? Great private schools. She could stay with me for a few months. I stared at her, stunned. What are you talking about? She's only 6. And I'm her mother. Vanessa smiled, but it didn't warm me like it used to. I'm just thinking about her future. You're busy, Dean's always away. I just want to help. I didn't respond. But that night, lying next to a sleeping Ellie, a strange unease took over me. Dean's late nights, my mom's strange looks, Vanessa's words. They were like puzzle pieces, scattered, but slowly forming a picture I didn't want to see. The next morning, while I was washing Ellie's hair in the bathroom, she looked up at me and asked, "Mom, if one day I don't live with you anymore, will you be sad?" My heart stopped. "Who told you that?" I asked, trying to stay calm. "Grandma's friend's granddaughter said so, that I'll go to a faraway school and live with someone named V." She didn't finish, but I already knew the name. Vanessa. What I didn't know was that this was just the beginning of something bigger. A plan that had been in motion for a while. A plan where Ellie was the centerpiece. 3 days after Ellie asked that strange question, Dean came home after 10 p.m. I was sitting at the kitchen table, lights still on, dinner cold. He walked in, hung up his coat, and said the line I could now recite in my head. "Sorry, a client extended the meeting again." I didn't ask anything. I got up, served him dinner, and sat back down. I didn't want to fight. Not because I was weak, but because sometimes silence is the only way to hear what people are hiding. Dean ate without a word, eyes glued to his phone. At one point, he turned away while texting, and for a split second, I saw a name flash in the reflection on the glass cabinet. "V, call back." "Vanessa?" The name froze me. I couldn't be certain, but my instincts, as a mother, as a wife, told me something was very wrong. The next day, when I picked up Ellie, her teacher told me something that made me freeze. Ellie said she had trouble sleeping. She mentioned someone told her she might have to move and live away from you. "Bella, is everything okay?" I forced a reassuring smile, thanked her, and rushed Ellie home. But my mind was racing. I didn't tell Dean. Instead, I called my mom. Mom, has Vanessa said anything about Ellie lately? There was a long pause before she replied. She's just been talking about the future, Bella. She thinks Ellie deserves a better school. But no one has the right to talk about her future except me, I said, unable to hide my frustration. My mom sighed. Bella, you're a good mom, but you're stretched thin. Dean's always working, and Vanessa, she's just trying to help. Help. I was starting to hate that word. 2 days later, Vanessa dropped by around lunchtime. I had just gotten back from the lab. Dean was meeting a client. Vanessa brought 2 lattes and a bag with kids' clothes. I went shopping, she smiled, setting the bag down. I thought Ellie would love this purple dress. I didn't touch the coffee or open the bag. I looked her in the eyes. What are you doing, Vanessa? She blinked, then gave a light laugh. What? I'm just bringing gifts for my niece. And trying to convince everyone that she should live with you, away from her own mother. Is that what you're doing? Vanessa set her cup down harder than usual, but kept her voice smooth. Bella, you're overreacting. Do you know how much pressure Dean is under? Mom and Dad worry too. We all just want what's best for Ellie. What's best is for her to stay with her mother. A crooked smile flickered across Vanessa's face. Not the sister I used to know. That smile chilled me. If you think being a mother means you get to decide everything, you're mistaken. Children aren't property. That night, I found an unopened envelope in Dean's coat pocket. It was from a law firm in Seattle. Inside, documents about child custody consultation and a draft agreement for temporary guardianship transfer. I sat alone in the living room. The house was so silent I could hear the clock ticking. Only one question echoed in my head. How are they planning to take my daughter away from me? Ellie was asleep in her room, clutching her stuffed bunny like always. But this time, I couldn't calmly watch her sleep the way I used to. A storm was coming. And it wasn't from the outside, but from the very people who shared my blood. I knew I couldn't stay still anymore, because I wasn't just protecting Ellie from a plan. I was protecting her from a world I once believed was family. That Saturday, my mom called, her voice full of cheer. Bella, this weekend we're planning a picnic at Crater Ridge National Park. It's not too far, just about a 2-hour drive. We'll all hike along a little creek and watch the leaves fall. Ellie's going to love it. I didn't even have time to respond before she added, Vanessa's coming too. Your dad's already packed lunch. You just need to get yourself and Ellie ready. I paused for a few seconds, feeling something off. My family was never the outdoorsy type, and they definitely didn't plan last-minute outings in the chilly fall. But then Ellie jumped up on the chair, having overheard, and shouted, Mom, I want to go. I'll bring my magnifying glass. Maybe I'll find a rare red leaf. I smiled and patted her head. How could I say no when her eyes sparkled like that? That night, I told Dean about the trip. He closed his laptop, slightly frowning. Saturday? I've got a site visit with a new investor. Probably won't make it. I wasn't surprised. These meetings had been showing up as often as fallen leaves. I nodded. Then I'll take Ellie. But Dean, do you feel like something's changed in our family? He was quiet for a moment, then said, You're probably just overthinking. Either way, some fresh air might do you good. Saturday morning, I woke up early and packed sandwiches, fruit, water, and even a few bandages. I always carry a first aid kit on trips like this. My job has made me cautious by habit. Ellie wore her green beanie and showed off the tiny magnifying glass hanging around her neck. She was genuinely excited. My parents' car arrived on time. Dad was driving, Mom in the passenger seat, and Vanessa in the back, next to Ellie and me. Vanessa wore a trendy athletic outfit and expensive hiking shoes. Odd, considering I'd never seen her go on a hike before. But I didn't ask. I just observed. The weather was crisp, sunlight filtering softly through the trees. We walked along winding trails, eventually reaching a narrow dirt path into a sparse forest. Dad said, This is a newer route, not many people know about it. The view is amazing. I felt uneasy. This path didn't match any of the old routes we used to take when I was a kid. Still, I said nothing. Ellie chattered beside me, pointing at every branch. Mom, this leaf looks like a heart. Vanessa occasionally glanced at me over her sunglasses. Each time I caught her, she turned away, pretending to check her phone. When I asked, "Texting someone?" She paused for a second, then smiled. "Just checking the weather, signal's bad up here." Then my mom chimed in. "Today's going to be a special day, Bella, one you'll never forget." Even though she was smiling, her words made my skin crawl. My dad kept checking the rearview mirror, his eyes flicking from me and Ellie to the winding road ahead. We stopped at an open clearing near the edge of a gentle slope. In the distance, a valley of pine trees spread out, dotted with orange and red leaves. The breeze was light, the air clean, but my unease wouldn't go away. Dad parked the car, turned off the engine, and said, "From here, it's about a 20-minute walk to this cliff with a breathtaking view. No one in the family's been there yet." I slung the backpack over my shoulder, held Ellie's hand, and followed them. As we entered a denser patch of trees, Vanessa fell back to walk beside me and suddenly asked, "Have you ever thought about sending Ellie to boarding school?" I stopped cold. That question wasn't random. "No, and I have no plans to." Vanessa shrugged. "There are some things you can't control forever, Bella. Life changes fast." It didn't sound threatening, but it made my skin prickle. Just then, Ellie ran ahead, then turned back and called out, "Mom, there's a high spot up here. You can see the whole mountain." Before I could answer, my parents and Vanessa had already moved toward the edge of the cliff. That's when I realized none of them had brought much. Just a few water bottles, no blankets, no food, no maps, not even a compass. I gripped Ellie's hand tighter, feeling my heart pounding. And then I saw my mother give Vanessa a signal with her eyes. I slowed down, pulling Ellie closer as we neared the edge. From here, the entire Crater Ridge Valley came into view, sunlight slicing through distant trees. It was peaceful. Eerily so, like nature itself was trying to distract me. Dad stood right at the edge, pointing out ahead. "See that, Bella? If we go just a bit further, there's another ledge that sticks out. The view from there is incredible. I went once." I nodded faintly, but my eyes never left Mom's hand, tight around her nearly empty backpack. Vanessa stepped closer, then placed a hand on my shoulder, giving it a light squeeze. "Ever wonder if life could be easier, Bella?" I turned to her, my eyes filled with suspicion. "What are you talking about?" She didn't answer right away, just smiled, and that smile, once familiar, now held nothing warm. Then suddenly she reached for my arm. I recoiled, instinctively pulling Ellie back. "Get your hand off me, Vanessa." "Bella, I need to show you something. Just for a second." Before she could finish, my dad stepped toward Ellie. She looked up and smiled. "Grandpa, did you see the eagle?" "Of course, sweetheart. Come here, I'll show you." He bent down, lifted her in his arms, and began walking toward the edge. It all happened in seconds, but to me it felt like time stopped. I screamed, "Stop, put her down." But before I could lunge forward, my mother shoved me hard from behind. The force sent me stumbling, my foot slipping on the uneven ground. I nearly lost my balance, my hands flailing until one managed to grip a small branch growing along the cliff's edge. Vanessa stepped closer, her face ice cold. Her voice dropped low. "I'm sorry, Bella, but this is necessary. It'll be over quickly." I struggled to stay upright, heart pounding, my eyes locked on Ellie writhing in my father's arms. "Dad, put her down. She's your granddaughter." But he didn't flinch. In fact, his expression was calm. Eerily so. "She won't remember any of this. It'll be over soon, Bella. For both of you." Panic exploded in my chest. I didn't need more proof. This wasn't some staged accident. This was a plan, a carefully orchestrated plot. with Ellie and me as the targets. In a split second, I threw myself forward, hurling my body into the air. As my hands reached Ellie's dangling legs, I pulled her toward me with every ounce of strength I had left. My father lost his balance, stumbled, and I completely lost my footing. Everything after that was wind roaring in my ears and the blue sky spinning. I wrapped my arms tightly around Ellie, curling myself around her like a living shield. She screamed into the wind. "Mommy!" I didn't answer. I just held her close, as if somehow a mother's love could slow the fall. We hit tree branches, slammed against jagged rocks. Pain burst through my shoulder, my back, my legs. I couldn't tell where I was injured. I just knew I still had Ellie in my arms. When we finally landed on damp earth at the bottom of the cliff, I felt blood running from my forehead into my eyes, blurring everything. But Ellie was still in my arms. Her tiny body trembled. But she was alive. I whispered, barely audible. "Are you okay, Ellie? Mommy? I'm scared." I couldn't say anything more. Darkness swept over me. But I knew I had to stay awake. I had to survive. Because I wasn't just a mother. I was Ellie's only anchor left in this world. They couldn't stop me from falling, but I wouldn't let them bury the truth. Pain screamed through my body, locking me in place. My left eye was swollen shut, my head spinning. My left wrist felt broken, and I couldn't feel my right leg. The smell of blood mixed with damp soil filled my nose. I was still cradling Ellie, her faint breath warm against my neck. I slowly opened my eyes, careful not to move too much. Trees loomed above us, their branches filtering in pale light. The air was unnervingly silent. I swallowed hard and turned my head. Ellie was staring at me, eyes brimming with tears. She whispered, her voice tight. "Mom, are we gonna die?" I shook my head, even though the motion sent a jolt of pain through my shoulder. "No, I'm here with you, and we're going to live." Ellie trembled, then buried her face into my chest. We lay still like that for a while, until I heard faint voices above us. Whispers from the cliff top. "Do you see anything?" My mother's voice. "No, not moving," my father replied, flatly. "Good. No one comes out here. No one's going to find them." Vanessa's voice sounded relieved, but also oddly unsure. I quickly pressed my hand over Ellie's mouth, signaling her to stay quiet. She nodded immediately, tucking her face into my shirt. "Let's go." "If they're alive, they're not getting out of here anyway," my mom added. I held my breath, heart pounding as their footsteps faded into the distance. When I was sure they were gone, I loosened my hand. Ellie looked up at me and whispered, "Mom, what if they come back and find out we're alive? Maybe we should pretend we're not." I stared at her, speechless. She was only 6, yet somehow she understood just how dangerous this was. I nodded slowly. "Yeah, let's stay still for a little longer, okay?" She nodded. I pulled her close, shut my eyes, and kept our bodies as still as possible. Time stopped in that forest. Only the sound of wind and the distant call of birds. I listened to every beat of her small heart beside mine, while anger slowly spread through my veins. Not from the fall, but from the betrayal. My parents. Vanessa. The man I once loved. All of them had joined forces to plan this, to eliminate us like we were just obstacles. After a while, Ellie lifted her head. Her eyes were teary but clear. "Mom, I think I know what they're doing." "What do you mean, Ellie?" I whispered back. "I heard Aunt Vanessa talking to Dad when I was playing hide-and-seek in the garden. I was hiding behind the rose bushes. She said, 'It'll all be over soon, we just need Bella to agree to the picnic.' Dad said, 'Just do what we planned, the insurance money's coming.'" I froze. It felt like someone punched me in the chest. They hadn't just wanted us gone. They had counted on the life insurance. "I didn't tell you before because I thought they were joking. I'm sorry." I hugged her tightly, forcing my voice to stay steady. It's okay, Ellie, you've been so brave. I'm proud of you. I checked the backpack. Most of our supplies had flown out during the fall, but thankfully there was a dry towel and 1 bottle of water left. I cleaned the scrape on Ellie's cheek before turning to assess my leg. The pain shot through me when I tried to lift my right leg. It nearly made me black out. I bit down hard, drawing blood to keep from crying out. It felt broken. My left wrist was badly swollen, barely usable, but I still had my right hand, my mind, and I had Ellie. We needed rescue. But my phone, if it had survived, was probably smashed or lost somewhere on the steep slope. I turned to Ellie. I can't walk fast, but you can. You might be able to find the path back, but only if it's really safe, okay? Ellie shook her head immediately, eyes filling with tears. No! I'm not leaving you alone. I smiled faintly, my face pale from the pain. Then we'll go together. Little by little, I'll lean on you and we'll get out of here. Together. Ellie nodded firmly. I broke off a branch to use as a crutch, leaning on it and on my daughter as we began to inch away from danger. Every step was agony. But I didn't stop. Because I knew, once we made it out alive, the truth would come to light, and this time, no one, not even family, would be able to hide what they'd done. Ellie and I walked through the forest for 3 hours. Every step was a battle between blinding pain and the will to survive. There were moments I wanted to collapse right there and let it all end. But every time, Ellie held my hand and whispered, "Mommy, we're almost out." I gripped her hand tighter and kept going. By late afternoon, we were lucky enough to come across an elderly couple camping near a small creek. The woman, Mrs. Margaret, nearly jumped up when she saw me covered in blood and limping, while Ellie dropped to the ground, completely exhausted. "Can you hear me?" the man asked. I opened my mouth, but the words caught in my throat. I can't talk. After that, everything became a haze. I barely remember the sound of sirens growing louder, Ellie's small hand wrapped tightly around mine, and her calm voice telling the paramedics that I had protected us. 3 days passed before I regained consciousness in a hospital room. My arm was in a cast, my leg propped up on pillows, and layers of bandages covered the cuts and bruises across my body. Ellie was curled up in a chair beside me, asleep, her tangled hair falling over the face I cherished more than anything. A man in civilian clothes sat quietly next to my bed. He carried the calm but firm demeanor of someone used to difficult conversations. Though his expression was serious, his eyes held a quiet kindness. He introduced himself as Detective Callahan from the Oakfield County Police Department and gently explained that he needed to ask me a few questions about what had happened. Despite the pain, I nodded and began recounting everything. Our family outing, Vanessa's strange behavior, and the terrifying fall that nearly ended my life. I spoke slowly but clearly, determined to leave out nothing. When I got to the part where Ellie overheard Dean and Vanessa talking, I saw Callahan pause, scribbling quickly into his notebook. "Your daughter remembered their conversation clearly?" I nodded. "She's incredibly sharp, and I trust everything she told me." He sat back slightly and said, "We've already started reviewing your husband's financial records, and there's something you need to be aware of." He reached into his case and pulled out a file, flipping it open to a highlighted page. 4 months ago, Dean updated your life insurance policy. He raised it to $3 million, stating it was for emergency family protection. He listed himself as the sole beneficiary. A cold chill crept down my spine. $3 million? He nodded gravely. "And the witness who signed the amendment? Your sister!" Vanessa G. Miller. My heart pounded, my head spinning with the realization. So they were in on it together, Dean and Vanessa. "Unfortunately, it goes deeper," Callahan said, cutting in. "We traced a bank transfer from your mother to Dean, made just 1 week before the incident. The memo line read, 'Final payment for the plan,' amounting to $500,000. My breath caught in my throat. My parents? They were part of it too? Callahan didn't look away. "I'm sorry, Bella. All signs point to a conspiracy involving your husband, your sister, and your parents. The messages we found suggest they'd been coordinating this plan for over 6 months, likely intending to silence both you and your daughter. The walls around me seemed to close in. The people I had trusted most, my family, had plotted my demise. After a moment, Callahan continued. We issued warrants for Dean and Vanessa immediately after you gave your statement. But when our team got to their locations, both had vanished. Dean's car was later found near a small, private airstrip. My stomach dropped. This wasn't over. I could feel it. Will you catch them? I asked, meeting his gaze. We've issued a federal warrant. In the meantime, I recommend that you and Ellie go into protective custody until we can ensure your safety, he said firmly. I looked at my daughter's sleeping face, still dotted with healing cuts, and felt a surge of strength rise within me. I was no longer the scared, broken woman who had fallen off a cliff. I had survived, and I would fight for justice. With everything I had. 3 days later, I was moved to a secure recovery room with law enforcement stationed just outside. Ellie was placed temporarily under the care of a social worker while the investigation deepened. When Callahan returned, he was holding a much thicker case file. His face was set with purpose. This wasn't just a case to him anymore. It was personal. We just got a hit from a toll booth camera 200 miles out. It captured Vanessa driving out of Oregon, likely heading toward Nevada. We've escalated the warrant to federal status. I gripped the edge of the bed, even though my wrist was still bandaged. What about Dean? Callahan flipped to another page. He's using an alias, but here's something interesting. When we checked flight history, we found he booked a private flight under the name Daniel Morrison. The departure time matches when they disappeared, but the flight was canceled at the last minute, possibly because he suspected we were onto him. I exhaled slowly. They weren't free yet. The next day, I was allowed to meet with a government-appointed attorney. During our first session, he confirmed, "We have complete financial records, your daughter's testimony, and recovered text messages between Dean and Vanessa from Dean's old phone, which the police found in his abandoned car. This case has enough evidence to charge them with attempted murder, conspiracy, and insurance fraud." Just then, the door opened. Ellie walked in with a female social worker. She ran over, throwing her arms around me, her face lighting up despite the bandages on her cheeks. "Mommy, I told Detective Callahan everything. I remember it all." I blinked in surprise. "You gave a statement?" Ellie nodded, then looked over at Callahan, who had entered behind her. He smiled. "This little girl is so sharp and composed. Our investigators were stunned." She recounted everything she heard. Vanessa's call with Dean, and even the conversation between Mrs. Nora and Mr. Walter about how everything would be fine if Bella just didn't push back. I looked at my daughter, torn between heartbreak and pride. She was only 6, yet she was the key to unraveling everything that had been hidden. "Were you scared?" I asked softly. Ellie shook her head. "No, I just thought, if I told the truth, then you wouldn't have to be scared anymore." I held my daughter tightly, feeling each tiny breath begin to steady against my chest. Everything wasn't over yet, but I knew we were finally heading in the right direction. 2 days later, the police found Dean hiding out in a small cash-only rental cabin on the edge of Nevada. They raided the place at dawn and arrested him while he was trying to burn papers and destroy his laptop. Vanessa was arrested later that afternoon at a roadside gas station. She'd been trying to swap vehicles through an off-the-record deal but was recognized by a security camera. That evening, Callahan gave a short update. "Both are in custody and being extradited back to Oregon. As for your parents, Walter and Nora, we've issued subpoenas. They were recorded in a call with Dean discussing a split agreement. It's undeniable." I looked out the hospital window, the late afternoon sun casting soft light through the trees. For the first time in weeks, I didn't feel afraid. 3 days later, we were officially discharged, but the police advised that Ellie and I move into a secured witness protection residence until the trial. In a closed press briefing, police confirmed, Evidence confirms this was a coordinated murder plot to obtain a $3 million 0 cents life insurance payout. The 6-year-old girl is not only the sole surviving witness, but the key to uncovering the entire plan. I held Ellie's hand tightly as we watched the broadcast on TV. We were in an unfamiliar place, under 24/7 protection, but for the first time, I didn't feel alone. Because now the truth was finally on our side. 8 months after Ellie and I survived the fall at Crater Ridge, the trial of Dean, Vanessa, and my parents officially began at Oakfield County Courthouse. The whole small town buzzed with disbelief. No one could imagine that a seemingly perfect family was now facing charges of attempted murder. On the first day, I arrived in a wheelchair, my arm still in a brace from a fracture that hadn't fully healed. Ellie sat beside me, gripping my hand, wearing a sky blue dress she chose because it's Mommy's favorite color. I didn't cry, and I wasn't afraid. What I brought to court was the truth, and the unwavering strength of a mother who couldn't be broken by betrayal. Dean entered in a gray suit, expressionless. Vanessa followed, hair tied neatly, her eyes gliding past me like I was a stranger. My parents, Walter and Nora, kept their heads down, avoiding eye contact with everyone. I was used to that look. I'd grown up with it. The prosecutor opened with a sharp indictment, laying out detailed evidence of the murder plot, insurance fraud, and endangerment of a minor. Every fact cut like a knife, but I sat calmly. I had survived to expose this truth. I was called to testify on the second day. The courtroom was silent as I recounted everything. The trip, the fall, the unbearable pain, and the unforgivable betrayal. I didn't cry. My voice was steady. I looked Dean in the eye and said, "You didn't kill me, and you'll never get what you wanted. Because Ellie is not something you can trade for money." Vanessa kept her head down. She never once looked at me. That day, Ellie also testified, but through a pre-recorded video since she was still under child witness protection. In the video, her voice was small but clear. I heard Aunt Vanessa tell my dad that Mommy and I wouldn't be here anymore if everything went right. I was really scared, but I trusted Mommy. She protected me. She's a good person. No one in the courtroom could hold back tears, not even the judge. During their defense, Dean stood up, voice bitter and defensive. I was pushed into a corner. Bella wasn't the woman I once loved. She controlled everything. I just wanted freedom, to escape that suffocating life. Vanessa wasn't any softer. Bella always acted like she was right, the victim. But if she weren't around, Dean would have been happy. We just wanted to be free. I sat quietly. Their words no longer hurt me. In fact, they only revealed the depth of their guilt. It wasn't just murder they attempted. It was complete denial of accountability. When asked if they had any last words before sentencing, my parents said nothing about me or Ellie. My father only mumbled, "We just thought she didn't deserve that life." The judge struck the gavel 3 times. The air in the courtroom froze as the verdict was read. Defendants Dean Carter and Vanessa G. Miller are sentenced to 25 years in prison for first-degree attempted murder and are barred from contacting any witnesses post-Kalish. Defendants Walter and Nora G. Miller are sentenced to 15 years for conspiracy to commit murder and child endangerment. I closed my eyes and let out a breath I felt like I'd been holding my whole life. I wasn't happy. I wasn't sad. Just relieved. Justice had finally spoken the names of the people who once called me daughter. After the trial, dozens of strangers approached me and Ellie, former neighbors, old friends, even people I'd never met, hugging us, offering words of support, saying, "You survived for all those who were too afraid to speak." I didn't say a word. I just leaned down, hugged Ellie close, and whispered in her ear, "We did it, Ellie. Now it's time to start truly living." After the trial, Ellie and I didn't return to our old home in Oregon. The police advised us to remain under witness protection until all threats were cleared, but I requested a transfer to somewhere far away. Somewhere without memories. somewhere no one knew our names, somewhere Ellie could start over. With help from my attorney and a domestic abuse survivor support group, I reconnected with an old friend, Grace, a high school classmate I hadn't spoken to in nearly 10 years. When she heard what had happened, she didn't ask for details. She just said over the phone, "Come here, stay as long as you need." Evergreen Valley, Colorado welcomed us on an early spring morning. The snow hadn't fully melted, but new buds were already pushing through the earth. Grace lived with her husband and 2 young kids in a cabin on the edge of the woods, about a 15-minute drive from town. The air was peaceful, strangely quiet, and for the first time in ages, I saw Ellie sleep through the night without waking up. I began working part-time at a small clinic downtown. Dr. Caroline, the owner, was an older woman, stern but compassionate. During our first meeting, she looked at me for a long moment, then said, "I don't need to know your past, but I see the caution in your eyes, and that's what patients need. If you're willing, you've got a job here." I nodded, unable to hide my gratitude. The work wasn't much, but it gave me rhythm again. The sound of blood pressure monitors, the click of drawers, the scent of antiseptic, these things gave me back a sense of control after so long drowning in chaos. Ellie was enrolled at a small elementary school just down the road from Grace's house. At first, she was shy, quiet, often sitting alone during recess. But just a few weeks in, her teacher called me and said, "Today, Ellie drew a picture of her family. It was of a little girl holding hands with a woman standing under the sun. When I asked, she said, 'That's me and my mom because we walked through a really dark night.'" I was silent for a long moment, eyes stinging. Then I simply said, "Thank you for telling me." Ellie and I began seeing a trauma therapist once a week. Her name was Dr. Helen Monroe, a specialist in working with survivors. She didn't ask direct questions. Instead, she let Ellie draw, play with sand, and describe her dreams in the simplest words. With me, she only said, "Don't force yourself to forgive. Focus on the one thing worth keeping: survival." Week by week, I watched Ellie begin to smile more. She started telling me stories from class, about how Jason spilled milk on his shirt and didn't cry, or how the teacher read books in a funny voice. Simple things, small things, but to me, they were proof she was becoming a child again. One Friday afternoon, I was cooking dinner with Grace in the warm kitchen when Ellie came running in, cheeks pink from the wind. "Mom, we're going on a field trip tomorrow. The teacher said you can come if you want." I looked at her and suddenly remembered myself in the forest. Hands bloodied, back aching, never letting go of my daughter for even a second. I smiled. "Of course I'll come, you and me. We always go together." That night, after Ellie had fallen asleep, I stepped out onto the porch, leaning against the wooden railing, gazing up at a sky full of stars. I thought about everything I'd lost. A family that no longer felt like one, a marriage that once seemed perfect, and the people who had once called me daughter, sister. But then I thought about what I still had. A brave little girl, real friends, and a second chance. In a place where no one knew my name, and where I could live without fear. I closed my eyes, took a deep breath, and for the first time in years, I felt light. It happened naturally, as if everything had been quietly aligning without any of us noticing. The first person to strike up a conversation was Mr. David Clark, the principal at Ellie's school. I met him during a parent meeting, about 3 months after Ellie started school in Evergreen Valley. David was tall, with salt and pepper hair and kind eyes behind thin-rimmed glasses. He radiated patience and warmth, qualities I hadn't seen in a man for many years. After the meeting, he caught me in the hallway as I struggled to untangle Ellie's jacket from a door handle. "You're Ellie's mom, right? I'm David Clark, the principal. I just wanted to say, she's a wonderful student." I smiled, still a little guarded. "Thank you. She's trying really hard to catch up." He looked at me for a moment, then said gently, "You don't need to explain anything. Here, we don't care about anyone's past. All we care about is that today," Ellie smiled on the playground. After that day, I saw Mr. David more often when picking Ellie up. At first, we exchanged brief greetings. Then our conversations grew longer, deeper. I told him about my work at the clinic, about Ellie and our journey. He told me about his years teaching math before becoming a principal, and why he chose to stay in a small town instead of moving to the city. David never asked about the scars on my arms, or why Ellie sometimes woke up screaming in the night. He just listened when I was ready to speak, and sat in silence when I needed space to heal. Ellie's 8th birthday came on a softly snowy day. I'd planned a small gathering in Grace's backyard, but Grace had secretly invited neighbors, my coworkers from the clinic, and even Mr. David and a few teachers from school. Ellie wore a light purple dress, the color she said looked like the sky when I hugged Mommy at sunset. She ran around the yard among laughter, balloons, cake, and bright-colored gift boxes. Her face glowed like winter sunlight. I stood in the kitchen, watching through the window as David knelt to help Ellie retie the scarf slipping from her neck. They were both laughing, and for the first time in my life, I didn't feel left behind. After the party, as guests slowly left, David stayed behind to help clean up. I was loading dishes into the sink when he handed me a small envelope. This is a little gift from the school. We do this for all our students who've been through tough times. Nothing big, just a couple movie tickets and a new book. I took the envelope, so moved I nearly teared up. But David didn't leave right away. He stood still for a moment, then looked at me seriously. Bella, I don't know what brought you here, but I do know this. What you and your daughter brought to this place is something truly special. Strength, hope, and kindness. I said nothing, my fingers tightening around the envelope. Do you believe family can be something we create, not just something we're born into? I asked. David didn't answer right away, but the look in his eyes, deep and gentle, was a more perfect answer than any words could have been. That night, as I tucked Ellie into bed, she reached for my hand and whispered, "Mom, can I call Mr. David, Uncle? He's kind, like he's part of our family." I smiled softly and nodded. "You can call him anything you want, sweetheart. As long as you feel safe and happy." I stood quietly by the bedroom window, watching the snow fall outside the porch. Each white flake drifted down like it was softly covering the traces of everything we'd left behind. And I knew Ellie was right. Family doesn't have to be the people we share blood with. Family is where someone waits for us to step out of the dark, with kindness, patience, and unconditional love. And I had found that kind of family. In Ellie's eyes, in the embrace of friends, and in a man who gently tied a scarf for an 8-year-old girl, with all his heart. Our story, Ellie's and mine, isn't just about survival. It's proof that sometimes real family doesn't come from blood, but from the people who choose to love and stay. We lost everything, only to find what truly matters: freedom, peace, and trust. In a world full of uncertainty, I've learned that no matter how dark the past may be, with love and faith, we can rewrite our lives, even from the most shattered pieces. What do you think about Bella and Ellie's journey? Is real family defined by blood or by love and choice? Share your thoughts in the comments below. And don't forget to follow the channel for more powerful stories about family and resilience. My name is Olivia. When I was 16, my parents said they wanted the whole family to take a relaxing vacation. Just the 3 of us. No little brother, no work calls, no distractions. I thought they were joking. But when they booked tickets to Italy, I believed them. "This will be a fresh start," my mom said, her voice light as air, though her eyes didn't meet mine. I wasn't a perfect daughter. I failed science, got into shouting matches with classmates, and was called to the principal's office a few times. But I never imagined those would be reasons enough for them to take me out of the country and then disappear. At first, the trip looked just like a typical holiday postcard. Rome glowing in golden sunlight, cobbled streets, icy gelato melting on the tongue. We took pictures at the Trevi Fountain. My mom hugged me gently from behind while my dad held the camera like we were truly a family trying to heal old wounds. I wanted to believe it. I really did. That morning, we had breakfast at the cafe below the hotel. Dad ordered his usual black espresso. Mom picked a pastry and wore her brick red lipstick, the one she only used on special occasions. I sat across from them, eating and texting my best friend back home. It's okay. I think they're really trying. Then my mom looked at me and said, barely louder than a whisper, "Let's take a walk, pick up a few souvenirs. Just 15 minutes. I nodded, not thinking twice. But 15 minutes turned into an hour, then 2, then 3. No texts, no calls. No one came back. I stumbled to the front desk, asking for my parents' names. The receptionist looked confused, then said, "They checked out this morning." I froze. I ran upstairs and pounded on the hotel room door, but my keycard no longer worked. A staff member helped open it. Inside, empty. No luggage, no clothes, not a single sign I had ever belonged there. My phone was dead. I had no passport, no cash. Even my small backpack, my constant companion, had vanished without me noticing. I collapsed in the hallway, hands shaking, heart pounding. Every call to my parents went straight to voicemail. I kept texting, one frantic message after another. "Where are you? Is this a joke? I'm really freaking out." No reply. That night, I slept on a bench at the train station. The wind off the tracks was sharp and cold against my face. Every train whistle echoed like a slash through the silence. I had imagined many awful scenarios in my life, but never this, that my own parents would leave me behind, in a foreign country. The next morning, I found a small folded note in my jacket pocket, written in my mom's familiar handwriting. "You're 16, old enough to survive." No apology, no explanation. Just one sentence, cold, final, and ringing in my head like the last snap of a thread I'd been clinging to. I didn't know where I was. I didn't know where to go. Everything had disappeared. Not in a nightmare, but in a painfully real moment. And I realized they didn't just leave me behind. They had erased me from their lives. I don't remember how long I walked after leaving the hotel. Just that my feet burned, my eyes stung from exhaustion, and my stomach screamed for anything. I wandered the cobbled streets of Rome, tucking myself into narrow alleys to avoid strangers' stares. Night fell quickly, colder than I expected. No blanket, no one, just a stone bench under the shuttered front of a store. I curled up, arms wrapped around my stomach, trying not to cry, but the tears came anyway. Every honk, every footstep made me flinch. I had never felt fear like that. Not fear of the dark, but fear of belonging nowhere at all. By the third day, hunger had dulled all taste to bitterness. I passed a tiny bakery on the corner of Via Mariulana. The smell of baking flour and melting butter teased every cell in my body. I stopped. A tray of fresh baguettes rested on the windowsill, probably left to cool. I didn't think, my hand reached out. Quick, sneaky. Just hoping to grab one before anyone saw. But another hand caught my wrist first. I froze. Trying to steal? The voice was low, firm. No anger, no scolding. I turned slowly. A woman, around her 60s, hair white as snow tied into a bun, flour-speckled apron, stood in front of me. She looked right into me, like she could read everything I didn't say. I said nothing. I couldn't. "Hungry." I nodded, barely, as if moving too much might shatter me. You take bread, you wash trays. Until I can see my reflection in them, I don't believe my ears, but she wasn't joking. She unlocked the door and gestured me inside. Her name was Marta. She had owned Forno di Marta for over 30 years. No husband, no kids, just an old oven, an aging cat named Espresso, and hands hardened by flour and fire. That night, I scrubbed nearly 20 baking trays caked in oil and burnt crumbs. The water was freezing, the vinegar cleaner clung to my skin. But I had never felt so grateful. Good enough, Marta said when I finished the last one. Upstairs, last room, down the hall. Old mattress, thin blanket. Not fancy, but better than the street. I stood silent, wanting to ask why she did this, but she had already turned, back to her rising dough. The room was tiny, barely fit a bed, a desk, and a flickering yellow lamp. I curled under the faded blanket. For the first time in days, I slept. No train whistles, no hunger pangs, no fear of being forgotten. The next morning, Marta was already baking before sunrise. I smelled coffee. I stepped into the kitchen, and before I could speak, she placed a warm croissant in my hand. Eat. Then learn to shape dough. She never asked about my past, never asked why I was alone. Maybe she already knew. Or maybe she understood that some questions are best left unanswered. Day by day, I learned to feel when the dough was just right, to twist my wrist to dust evenly, to gauge the oven heat by its hum. Marta didn't teach with instructions. She taught with glances, with do-overs, with quiet corrections like, better next time. I didn't know how long I'd stay. I didn't know what tomorrow held. But in that little kitchen, with a meowing cat and the warmth of the oven, I started to believe I might survive. Maybe even begin again. In the early months at Marta's bakery, I just existed. But once the hunger faded and my hands adapted to flour and fire, I started to think beyond survival. I couldn't remain the abandoned girl forever. I needed to do something for myself, beyond myself. Or at least discover who I was without anyone guiding me. One morning, while taking out the trash behind the bakery, I found an old backpack dumped near the bins. For some reason, I opened it. Inside was a cracked laptop, scratched all over, charger cable frayed. I nearly threw it away, until I thought, what if it still works? I smuggled it upstairs, used kitchen tape to hold the charger together. 3 days later, after many failed attempts, the screen flickered on. Dim, slow, but it lit up. My first self-made light. I used free Wi-Fi from the cafe next door, standing by the window for signal. I didn't know what I was looking for. Until I found a free GED prep site. I signed up. By day, I baked, scrubbed, served. By night, I crouched by a tiny third-floor window, relearning math, reading American history in English that now felt foreign. I scribbled chemistry formulas on the back of pastry boxes, underlining them with borrowed ink pens from Marta, who still never asked why I studied. As long as you're trying, she once said while slicing apples for a tart. That's enough. Nearly a year later, I took the GED. The test was at a small community center, 2 bus rides from the bakery. I passed. Not perfectly, but enough to prove I could do more than survive. I'm not sure why I grew obsessed with business. Maybe because I feared dependency? I started reading about finance, beginner articles, then forums, then complex analyses I needed a dictionary to understand. I devoured it all, like my brain was as starved as my body once was. One day, while wiping tables, I spotted a crumpled magazine someone left behind. The cover read, "Small Italian Startup Restructures for Global Growth." I didn't grasp it all, but I saw a tiny stock code at the bottom. That night, I borrowed a prepaid Visa card from a bakery supplier, someone I'd helped tutor his son in English, and used the €100, 0 cents, I'd saved to invest. I didn't expect anything. I just wanted to see if what I'd learned mattered. 2 weeks later, the stock doubled, then tripled. I watched the numbers flash on screen, heart pounding out of my chest. Not because I was rich, but because, for the first time ever, I saw direct results from what I had learned, done, believed in. Without being told, I cashed out and split the profits. Half bought a new espresso machine for the bakery. The old one had been leaking since last month. The other half I kept. for a dream I hadn't yet named. That night, as I was copying down a list of free finance websites into my little notebook, Marta looked at me and tilted her head. "You've changed," she said. "You used to walk like the floor might collapse under you. Now you walk like you know where you're going." I didn't know how to respond, but inside I whispered something to myself. I wasn't just the abandoned girl anymore. I didn't know when it happened, but the numbers on the screen no longer scared me. They became familiar, like the smell of fresh bread in the morning, like the clatter of the mixer each afternoon. After a few small investments, I saved enough to buy a brand new laptop. For the first time in my life, something just for me. I studied financial planning, supply chain optimization, even basic contract writing. All of it was free, from YouTube videos made by strangers to blog posts buried deep in corners of the internet written by people who had once gone bankrupt and climbed their way back. I scribbled notes on the backs of pastry wrappers, cardboard box flaps, any scrap I could find. One evening, after helping Marta close the shop, I sat in front of the new espresso machine, the gift I'd secretly ordered with profit from my second investment. She looked at me and said something I'll never forget. "You're not the girl digging through trash behind the bakery anymore, Olivia." I stayed quiet, because she was right. When I turned 19, I registered my first business license under the name Livia Consulting, just different enough that no one could trace it to me, but still felt like mine. I started by helping tourists understand the local market, guiding them on smarter currency exchanges, even helping some invest in small Italian startups. Then, from the people I had helped, I got referred to international students, people without legal documents, struggling with part-time jobs and skyrocketing rent. I taught them how to open digital bank accounts, how to find online income opportunities without ever leaving their tiny rented rooms. I showed them how to save every euro, and how one day that same euro could fund the dream they thought they'd lost. I didn't charge a fixed fee. Some gave me thank you gifts, phone credit, a pizza dinner, or a handwritten card. I kept every one, not for their value, but because they proved something I never used to believe. I could help someone. Marta didn't ask questions, as usual, but she knew. She saw me pay the gas bill when she sighed at the mailbox. She said nothing when I installed a new security camera after someone broke the bakery window. And on a crisp fall morning, when I handed her the first smartphone she'd ever owned, with large fonts and a speed dial button labeled Livia, she simply smiled, sipped her coffee, and nodded. "This old lady doesn't get these apps," she said, "but she knows how to say thank you." I still kept in touch with a few people from the US, people I once called used to know, but I never told them what I was doing. I didn't post anything online except the occasional photo of pastries to promote the shop. No one knew that Olivia, the girl once left behind in Rome, was now the quiet financial advisor to nearly 30 clients across Europe. I started sending money back to the US, not to my family, but to youth support centers in Ohio, the state I once lived in. Each month, I picked a different program. A life skills summer camp, a free coding class, a mental health group for teens rejected by their families. I never put my name. I just signed. From someone who survived. One day, Marta found me slumped over the counter, surrounded by finance papers and glowing spreadsheets. "What are you building?" she asked. I looked up and smiled. For the first time, truly. A place for people no one believes in. To start over. She stared at me for a long time, then said quietly, "Then don't forget to start with yourself." That night, I stood outside the closed bakery, watching the streetlight cast its glow on the stone pavement. I understood more clearly than ever. I was no longer a deleted footnote in someone else's story. I was writing my own. I was in the flower room, flipping through financial reports for a client, when Marta walked in, holding a crumpled newspaper someone had left on the morning coffee table. She didn't say anything. She simply placed it on the stainless steel counter and tapped a small box in the lower right corner of the real estate section. I leaned down. The dim light hit the bolded print. "Foreclosure property, Lakefront Lot, Westwoods, Cincinnati, Ohio. Auction at end of month. I looked closer at the address. Every number, every letter carried weight. I'd written that address on hundreds of school forms. I knew every crack in the road in front of that house, every creaky hinge that groaned in the wind. It was the house my parents bought after they abandoned me in Rome. The one I'd seen in photos they posted online with fake captions like, "Fresh start. Grateful for the peace life has given us." Now, that house was listed for foreclosure. I sat in silence, not because I was sad, but because somehow the world had just handed me back a key I thought was lost forever. A key to something that had never really closed. "What are you going to do?" Marta asked, eyes sharp as if she could see straight through me. I didn't answer right away, but that night, when the oven was off, I opened my laptop and began researching the auction. No one could know who I really was. If they recognized me, everything would fall apart. I registered for the auction under Livia Consulting, using perfectly legal paperwork. The business account was ready. The funds were ready. Not much for the wealthy, but enough, after 3 years of cautious investing. Everything was arranged quietly. I booked my flight to the US for the first time in 4 years. On the connecting flight from Rome to New York, I didn't sleep. I just stared out the window, where the thick layers of clouds looked like a foreign land. I used to think I'd never return, but I understood now. This wasn't returning, it was coming back, with a different role. I arrived in Cincinnati on a freezing early winter morning. The auction was held outdoors, in a parking lot outside the county administration building. People stood in small groups, thick coats, numbered paddles, documents in hand. I wore a charcoal gray suit, my hair tied up, thin-rimmed glasses. No one looked at me twice. Marta stood beside me, calm as a steady tree. When I leaned in to whisper a number, she raised the paddle, on time, without hesitation. The price climbed faster than I expected. A middle-aged man, likely a broker, kept bidding. Every time Marta raised our number, he glanced our way, confused by the two unfamiliar women. I didn't blink. When the auctioneer's gavel came down and announced sold to number 162, I didn't smile. I didn't exhale. I just stared at the printed confirmation from the mobile printer. The address they once called home, now under a company I built from the wreckage they left behind. I didn't feel victory or revenge. What I felt was closure. Like I'd finally shut a door I was once too afraid to walk through. We left the lot in silence. Only when we were in the car did Marta speak. "You could have walked away, but you looked it in the eye. That's the difference between running and continuing." I turned to her. Her eyes held sorrow but no fear. Maybe because she understood, just like I did. Sometimes, to be truly free, you have to return to the place that caged you and unlock the door yourself. I nodded. And I knew the hardest part was just beginning. The meeting was scheduled at a small real estate office on the outskirts of Cincinnati, the kind used for signing deeds or renegotiating rental agreements. I chose it on purpose. Quiet, private, no nosy stares or gossiping voices. Everything had been arranged through my attorney, the only one who knew the full truth of my identity in this deal. I arrived 15 minutes early, neatly dressed, hair in a high bun, wireframe glasses, no makeup, but a cold, composed expression. I sat alone in the conference room with a glass of water, listening to the ticking clock, not afraid, just quiet. Like I was watching my 16-year-old self again, curled up in a strange city, waiting for an answer that never came. The door opened. 2 people walked in. My mother wore a beige cardigan and oversized sunglasses that covered half her face. Her chin was high, still clinging to a faded elegance like she was in control. My father trailed behind, clutching a worn leather folder, head low, steps hesitant. They sat across from me, showing nothing but a strange caution. They didn't recognize me. Not a flicker of hesitation, not a familiar gesture. To them, I was just the rep from a company that had bought the house they were living in. I took off my glasses. The moment stretched like a slash through the air. My mother stiffened, lips parting as if to speak, but no words came. My father blinked twice, then looked down. Avoiding my eyes like facing me meant facing a nightmare he'd long buried. "We've met before," I said, voice steady. "In Rome, when I was 16. My mother swallowed hard, fingers gripping her purse strap. We thought it would be easier for you," she said, her voice fraying. "We thought if we disappeared, you'd hate us less." I tilted my head, suppressing a bitter smile. "Instead of saying goodbye, you chose to disappear completely. Left me in a foreign country, no money, no passport, no message except old enough to survive." My father still wouldn't look up. I flicked the deed and slid it across the table. "I'm the one who bought the house you live in. The paperwork is fully legal. You have 30 days to leave." "You can't do this," my mother whispered. This time, there were real tears, but I knew they weren't from regret, only fear. "Can't?" I leaned back. "I used to wait for you to come back for me. Just once. But that never happened. I don't need an apology anymore. I need closure." Marta walked in right then, holding a folder. She said nothing, just placed it on the table and gave me a sharp, calm nod. "We'll send the formal move-out schedule tomorrow," she said, voice colder than steel. "If you need help relocating, our company can refer someone." My mother shook her head, nearly sobbing. "We're family, Olivia." I stood. Family doesn't abandon each other in a foreign country and walk away like their child never existed. You made your choice, and now I've made mine. I walked out without looking back. I didn't need to hear another word. I had lived long enough in silence to know this. Sometimes words don't need to be long, just timely. And I had just reclaimed the one thing they took from me, my right to choose. Less than a week after the meeting, I began to see my name appear on social media. Not in congratulations, but in venomous posts from the very person who gave birth to me. She's been poisoned by money and power and came back to steal her parents' home. We just wanted her to grow up strong. We didn't expect she'd return as a stranger. Cold and cruel. Under each post were hundreds of comments. Some were sympathetic, some furious, but most came from people I had never met, ready to judge a daughter who had kicked her parents out. I didn't respond. I didn't need to win online. I just needed to win in real life. Right after they moved out of the house, on time, without a word, I began renovating everything. The house that once symbolized betrayal was now becoming the foundation for something else. A safe place for girls who had been abandoned, just like me. I renamed the house Second Light, because I believe sometimes the first light goes out too soon, but that doesn't mean it's the last. I repainted the worn yellow walls in a soft, calming blue, got rid of the cold, heavy furniture and replaced it with cozy fabric sofas, warm bedside lamps, and secondhand bookshelves I collected from local libraries. The Live, Laugh, Love sign that used to hang in the living room was replaced with a simple framed quote, "You were not made to be invisible." The master bedroom became a shared space. I put in 2 bunk beds, each with its own little world, new mattresses, soft body pillows, and lockboxes for personal belongings. Marta, or as the girls later called her, Mama Marta, took charge of the kitchen. She taught them how to knead dough, how to keep an oven's temperature steady, how to make a perfect peach tart. But more than that, she taught them patience and trust, something it had taken me a long time to relearn. Our first session had 3 girls. Jamie, 17, kicked out after revealing she didn't follow her family's religion. Asha, 18, who wandered near the train station after her stepfather refused to take her in when her mother passed. And Zoe, 15, who didn't speak a word for the first week, just stared at the floor and nodded when spoken to. I didn't ask too many questions. I just said, "If you're here today, then you deserve to stay." We had dinner together every Saturday. I didn't allow phones at the table. Hands held spoons, mouths could smile or stay silent, if that's what someone needed. No one was forced. But slowly, short answers turned into stories. Silence gave way to laughter. One day, I saw Zoe quietly place a slice of Marta's toast on Jamie's windowsill, with a folded note, "In case you're hungry tonight." I didn't intervene. I just stood in the hallway, leaning against the wall, and smiled quietly. I continued my online consulting work. Part of the earnings went to keeping Second Light running. The rest went to funding job training programs and online courses for the girls. No one needed to know where the money came from. All they had to know was here. No one would ever be left behind again. Every time a new girl arrived, I took her upstairs to what used to be my bedroom. It had been split into an office and a reading nook. I let her sit down, then pointed to the wooden sign above the bookshelf. The words were carved by hand. "We don't promise to replace your old family, but we will not disappear." Then I handed her a pair of slippers, clean pajamas, and asked one question. "Tonight, would you rather sleep or talk?" The answer didn't matter. What mattered was, she had a choice. I didn't need to explain myself to the world. Because this house, the laughter from the kitchen, and Jamie's shy morning hugs were the only answers I ever needed. I didn't need validation from the past. I just needed to turn it into a foundation for something better. And now? I had. That afternoon, the sunset poured through the big glass window behind the kitchen, bathing everything in gold. From the edge of the table to Zoe's hair as she folded napkins quietly at the corner. The scent of cinnamon cookies mixed with the giggles upstairs. Asha and Jamie were fighting over tonight's playlist. It was a special evening. The 1-year anniversary of Second Light. I stood by the old door frame that used to whistle with wind on freezing nights when I was the forgotten child. Now, that very frame held a string of tiny lights, twinkling gently after dark. Nothing fancy, no flashy decorations, just things that truly belonged to people, not appearances. Marta stood at the counter, sleeves rolled up, showing a new girl how to slice apples safely. Her name was Eliza, 14, quiet and jumpy when someone raised their voice. But under Marta's hands, she softened. I watched them, then looked away, afraid to break that small, fragile moment. Because I knew, for Eliza, those apple slices were more than just fruit. They were the first taste of what it meant to stay. The door creaked open. Jamie peeked in, hair in a lopsided bun, voice excited. "Olivia, we found your old Bluetooth speaker. It's ours now." I laughed softly, hands up in surrender. "Just don't play rock at midnight, deal?" Jamie winked and vanished upstairs, laughter trailing behind. The party started soon after. No big cake, no confetti, just warm food, music, and the kind of glances that said more than any family dinner I'd ever had before. Everyone brought something, a story, a keepsake, a whispered wish. We called it the relight ritual. I stayed behind after everyone had gone to their rooms or sat on the porch listening to Marta's old Italian tales. Alone in the warm kitchen light, I held a cup of herbal tea that had long gone cold. On the table was the framed note I'd hung on the first day of renovations. Not a family photo, not childhood memories, but a piece of paper with these words. "We don't begin in perfect places, but we begin again, together." I closed my eyes. And for the first time in years, I didn't hear echoes from the past. No flashbacks of standing alone in a Roman square. No quiet ache of a forgotten child. I saw Eliza asleep on the armchair. Jamie tucked a blanket over her, spoon still in hand. Asha turned on the hallway light, casting a soft glow through the window. Marta stood outside, broom in hand, humming an old Italian song as she swept leaves. Everything in this house once carried the stain of betrayal. Every creak, every shadow, every door I once hated. Now they were filled with laughter, warmth, and new life. I stepped into the backyard, looking up at the golden lights glowing under the porch. The night sky was clear, stars twinkling, wind rustling through the trees like a gentle blessing. Second light wasn't just a shelter. It was a declaration. Proof to anyone who had ever been abandoned, labeled a burden, or made to feel invisible that we don't need to be accepted to exist. We just need a place to begin again. The right way. I looked back at the house, no longer a ghost from memory, and whispered, for no one to hear but myself. This isn't just a house. This is where we begin again. And this time, no one gets left behind. Olivia's story is proof that the wounds of the past don't need to be hidden or erased. They can become the foundation for something meaningful. From a girl left behind in a foreign land, she chose not revenge, but compassion and action. Second Light is more than a house. It's the rebirth of hearts once broken. In a world full of judgment, Olivia chose quiet healing and gave others the chance to start over, just as she once wished for herself. What do you think of Olivia's journey and the choices she made? Share your thoughts in the comments below. And don't forget to follow the channel for more heartfelt and powerful stories about life and family. My name is Nicole. I'm 32 years old and live in a small town about a 50-minute drive from Boston. Every morning, I make myself a cup of espresso, listen to the weather report, then walk to my office just over a block away from home. I'm the co-founder of a biotech startup in the healthcare field. A job that's not easy to explain, especially to people who think office work just means data entry all day. My family never understood what I do, or maybe they never really cared to. To them, I've always been the weird younger sister, the one who dressed simply, never wore much makeup, and was always glued to her laptop or in some meeting. Claire, my older sister, is the one they're proud of. She's 3 years older than me and has always been the perfect daughter in their eyes. Beautiful, graceful, soft-spoken, and charming. Even in family photos, I was just a faint shadow behind Claire's spotlight. On Thanksgiving or Christmas, relatives would gather around her with praise. Claire, you look stunning in that dress. Or Claire, your new boyfriend's a doctor. Impressive. And me? If anyone even remembered I existed, the line was always, Nicole, yeah, she's doing something in biotech, I think. They spoke as if I were a footnote at the bottom of the page. I used to think if I worked hard enough, if I stayed behind the scenes and carried the load, then one day my parents would finally see me and be proud just like they were of Claire. But no, all the attention, all the expectations, all the compliments, they were always hers. And me? I was always distant, dry, hard to talk to. They never knew I'd stayed at the office until midnight handling a crisis for a public health project worth nearly $2 million, 0 cents. They never asked how it felt to build a company from scratch with 3 college friends. When people ask about my family, I just give a faint smile and say, we haven't spoken in a while. It's nothing. Not because I'm hiding something, just because there's nothing left to say. We haven't talked in over 2 years. No texts, no calls, no birthday wishes. Just silence, like a broken line nobody bothered to reconnect. I used to believe family was the place you could always return to. But one day, on my mother's birthday, that belief shattered. It was late March. I had just closed a successful funding round with an investment firm from New York. I planned to take 3 days off and fly back early to help my parents prep for Mom's birthday, like I always did. Nothing fancy. I just wanted to help out, like always. When I called to let them know, it was my dad who picked up. I'm planning to come back early. Let me know if there's anything you need me to pick up or prepare, I said. I still remember his voice. Not angry, just strange. A short pause, then he cleared his throat. Nicole, if possible, don't come home this year. I froze for a second, thinking maybe he was worried I was too busy with work. It's okay, Dad. I've already cleared my schedule. I really want to be there. This time, his voice was firm. Claire is bringing her new boyfriend. He's a CFO. Well-spoken, clearly successful. Your job, Well, it's hard to explain. You showing up would just invite comparisons and make things awkward, so it's best you stay. I went numb. My chest tightened, a cold sting crawling down my spine. I gripped the phone and said through clenched teeth, "Are you saying I make the family look bad? That I shouldn't come home because I'm an embarrassment?" He didn't take it back. In fact, he doubled down. "If you insist on coming, then don't call me your father." Then he hung up. No hesitation, no second thoughts. My apartment went eerily quiet. The espresso cup in my hand had gone cold. I stared into the empty air like the world had cracked open with a single sentence. I didn't cry. I just sat there. And for the first time in my life, I realized something. I was no longer part of the family I had tried so hard to hold together. I sat there in my familiar armchair by the window, early spring sunlight pouring through the white curtains, unable to warm the chill inside me. My father's words echoed again, clear and final. "If you insist on coming, then don't call me your father." I looked down at my hands. My fingers trembled, not from anger but from something deeper, the breaking point. I had always thought that even if I'd never be loved like Claire, at least I was still their daughter. Turns out, I wasn't. I stood up and walked to my desk. Without hesitation, I opened my laptop and logged into my banking app. For over 2 years, I'd been sending money to my parents every month, covering their electric bill, water, internet, even cable. Nearly $600, 0 cents a month, not counting the extra I'd send when Mom said the fridge broke down or Dad's car needed work. They never asked if I could afford it. They just said, "Claire's struggling after switching jobs. If you can help, that'd be great." And I helped, quietly, as if it were my duty. As if responsibility were some invisible contract I'd signed the moment I started earning. I opened the transaction history and scrolled. The total popped up. $15,720, 0 cents. My heart sank, not because I regretted it, but because even after all of that, I was never enough. I hovered over each bill, electric, water, internet. Click. Then another. Notifications popped up. Auto payment canceled successfully. No alarms, no warnings, just silence. Just like how I'd always existed in my family. That night, I couldn't sleep. Not because I was angry, but because I kept thinking about how everything unfolded. About what my father said. About how my entire family was willing to cast me aside just to impress Claire's new boyfriend, a man I hadn't even met. I'd been compared all my life, but this was the first time I was publicly rejected. As if my existence was an inconvenience. Mom's birthday came quickly. I didn't call. I didn't send a card. I didn't post anything online, not out of spite, but because I couldn't pretend anymore. At exactly 5 p.m., as I sat on my balcony sipping peppermint tea, my phone buzzed. It was my mom. I stared at the screen for a few seconds, then let it go dark. A message came in right after. "Nicole, why is the power out? Can you check for us?" I set down my tea and opened the next message from Dad. "No water, no internet, call the providers, your mom's freaking out." I sat in silence, eyes fixed on the tree line out back. No anger, no pain, just an eerie calm. They didn't ask, "Are you okay?" Not a word about the phone call. They just wanted me to do what I'd always done, clean up the mess. Then came a text from Claire. "The internet's down, guests are coming, and Mom is almost in tears. What's going on?" I picked up my phone and typed. 3 weeks ago, Dad told me if I insisted on coming home, I shouldn't call him my father. I'm just doing what he asked. If this is inconvenient, maybe find someone you're not ashamed to introduce. I didn't send it. I deleted it. Not because I regretted it, but because I knew no matter what I said, they'd only hear what suited them. I set the phone down, leaned back in my chair, and closed my eyes. My little apartment was still and quiet. No complaints, no judgmental looks, no demands. The next day, Claire left a voicemail. Mom's been crying since last night. Do you know how important yesterday was? My boyfriend met the family for the first time, and everything got ruined. You're so selfish. I listened to the whole message, then turned off my phone. For years, I hadn't been selfish enough. Now it was time. I opened my work email and checked the weekend operations report. One subject line stood out. New Jersey staff transfer to Boston, awaiting approval. I opened the attached list, skimmed through the names, and then I stopped. Liam Prescott. That name made my heart skip a beat. I remembered it because just 3 days ago, my mother had mentioned it. Claire's boyfriend, Liam, works at a major corporation. I squinted at the file. Current position, Head of Finance, New Jersey branch, transferring to Boston HQ. Approver, Nicole Warren, co-founder. I let out a small laugh. Just a reflex. The world was smaller than I thought, and I knew what was coming had only just begun. I sat still in front of my laptop, hand resting on the mouse, my chest hollow, as if someone had taken a piece of my memory I'd clung to for too long. Nearly $16,000, 0 cents. Every cent of it paid by me, month after month, without reminders, without delays. And yet, not once had they said, "Thank you." Not once. I scrolled back through the payment list, the same lines repeating. $192.48, my electricity. $136.72, my water. $248.50, my internet and cable. Month after month, like I was their unpaid family accountant. Unseen, unacknowledged, forgotten. I remembered the last phone call with my mom about a year ago when she called around midnight just to say, "Nicole, the bathroom pipe burst. Can you call someone? Claire's on vacation with her boyfriend. You're the only one left." You're the only one left. It sounded harmless, but it was a bitter truth. I wasn't loved like a daughter. I was just the solution when the ones they truly cared about didn't show up. And now, being told not to come home because my presence didn't look good, I finally understood. All these years, nothing I did was ever received with love. I was only remembered when a bill needed paying or a problem needed fixing, but when I needed something, no one was there. My phone lit up again, a message from my mom. "Nicole, I know yesterday got a little tense, but if you could take care of the internet bill, that would be great. Claire is trying to keep things calm with the guests." I stared at the message like an outsider. No apology, no mention of the cruel rejection from my father. Just another request, like always. I set the phone down without replying. I stepped outside onto the porch, sitting in the wooden chair under the fading April sun. Boston wasn't warm yet, but the crisp air somehow made me feel clearer. I thought about Liam, Claire's new boyfriend, and now my incoming employee. The irony. My family excluded me from Mom's birthday because of him, while he was about to report directly to me. If life were a comedy, this would be its finest punchline. I returned to my desk and opened the email. The subject line stood out. New hire confirmation, Liam Prescott, transfer to Boston office. I clicked on the profile. Everything matched. Age, experience, degrees. A polished resume. Exactly the kind Claire would go for. Educated, established, charming on paper. I looked at the attached photo. Something familiar. Then I remembered. We'd briefly met at a conference about 6 months ago. He shook my hand and politely called me co-founder Warren, but neither of us made the connection. Or rather, I never cared enough about Claire to know who the man beside her was. Now I had a choice. Approve the transfer, or deny it. But I knew I didn't need to do anything. Life had already written the perfect script. I just needed to sit back and see what would happen when Claire found out her boyfriend reported to the sister who embarrassed the family. The next day, Liam arrived at the office. He stepped into mine with a folder, his face slightly tense. When I looked up, his eyes paused on me, then widened in shock. "Nicole?" he asked softly. I smiled faintly, calm and composed. "Welcome to Pacific Genomics. I'll be reviewing the entire financial plan for this quarter. I look forward to working with you." Liam froze. His face flushed, then turned pale. No one in my family knew I co-founded this company. No one had ever asked what I really did. They just assumed I was some low-level desk worker. I said nothing more, just slid the contract toward him. Liam took it and quietly left the room. I leaned back in my chair. I wasn't happy. I wasn't sad. I just felt like the wheel had finally turned. And this time, I didn't have to say a word. The truth had spoken for itself. The morning of my mother's birthday, the Boston sky was unusually gray. A thick fog hung in the air, making everything look blurred, like the world itself was bracing for something to unravel. I poured myself a strong black coffee, sat by the window, and stared at the empty yard. I didn't plan to do anything. No texts, no calls, no birthday post. I just wanted things to play out exactly as they were, without me. At 9 a.m., my phone buzzed. First message from Mom. "Nicole, sweetheart, I think the power's out. Can you check for us? It's an important day." I placed the phone face down on the table. Same tone. Sweet, gentle, like nothing had ever happened. Like I hadn't been told by my father that I embarrassed the family and shouldn't show up. 15 minutes later, a second message. This time from Dad. "Still no power. Water's not running either. Is something wrong with the payments? Call the provider now." Short, cold, no concern, no mention of me being excluded from the party. Just a command, like I was still their logistics manager. I sighed. For 2 years, I'd never missed a single payment. Electricity, water, internet cable. I canceled them all, one by one, the night my father hung up, and severed everything, because I was hard to introduce. And now, on the very day Claire was introducing her boyfriend to the family, the house was in chaos. No electricity, no water, no internet. Exactly as expected. By 11 a.m., the messages came flooding in. "Mom, Nicole, please, I'm begging you. Guests are arriving. Can you just help this once?" Dad, "No electricity. We can't cook. Where are you? Take care of this now." Claire, "Seriously, Nicole, today is special. Mom's about to cry. There's no internet. I can't call anyone. I'm losing it here. Can you stop being selfish?" I leaned back. My coffee had gone cold. The texts didn't make me feel vindicated. They didn't satisfy me. All I felt was emptiness. A quiet, unwavering emptiness. Then the phone buzzed again. A video call from Aunt Sharon, the only person in the family who still sent holiday messages, even if I rarely responded. I hesitated, then answered. Her old kitchen came into view, lit only by a phone flashlight. She looked tired, eyes slightly red. "Nicole," she said softly. "Your mom's in a panic. The house is dark, everyone's running around, and no one knows what to do." I said nothing, just looked at her. She paused, then added, not accusing, not defending. "What happened? You've never missed your mom's birthday. I know you have your reasons, but say something." I took a deep breath, keeping my voice steady. "My dad said I made the family look bad, told me if I insisted on coming, I shouldn't call him my father anymore. What do you think I should do after that?" Aunt Sharon froze. Her face changed in an instant. In the background, I heard noise, my mother saying loudly, "She's probably just sulking. No one would be heartless enough to do this." Then, a sharper voice. "Claire, Liam's almost here. Someone call the power company already. I can't believe she did this to us today." I gave a slight, joyless smile. Aunt Sharon heard everything. She didn't defend anyone. Didn't say a word. And then, unexpectedly, the screen shifted. A new face entered the frame. Liam. Same neat suit, same polished expression as in his resume. He stared at the screen and blurted out, almost involuntarily, "Nicole?" Everyone went silent. "You're Nicole Warren, the one who runs Pacific Genomics?" I nodded, eyes steady. A long pause. Then Liam turned to everyone in the room. "She's my direct superior. And the one who approved my transfer to Boston." Stunned silence. Claire's jaw dropped. My parents froze. No one said a word. I calmly replied, "Hope your introduction today goes well." Then I ended the call. After the call, I set my phone down without another word. Outside the window, the dim afternoon light filtered weakly through the thick gray clouds. Everything around me was so quiet, it barely felt real. No voices, no follow-up texts, no calls. Just me and a strange, weightless sense of relief, after a truth revealed not by me, but by them. I didn't need to expose anyone, I just stayed silent and let everything unfold exactly as it was meant to. Liam had confirmed it clearly. I was his superior, the co-founder of Pacific Genomics, the company they assumed I was just some desk worker for. In that moment, my family's kitchen became a stage where the masks fell, one by one, and no one could stop them. And Claire, my sister, the one who once whispered to Mom that Nicole should pick a job that's easier to introduce, now stood frozen beside a birthday cake that hadn't even been lit. She had tried so hard to impress her boyfriend with empty compliments and a picture-perfect family, but in the end, it was that very boyfriend who called me boss in front of everyone. I could picture the scene like I was watching a replay. My mother, so flustered she nearly dropped the cake tray. My father, red-faced, gripping the edge of the table. And the relatives, those who only showed up for food and judgment, sitting in stunned silence, eyes darting around as they tried to process what just happened. And Aunt Sharon still had the call going, her gaze no longer curious, but something closer to respect. She didn't say much, just gave me a small nod before ending the call. That evening, I got the first message from Claire. Long, messy, a mix of anger and desperation. "You knew all along, didn't you? You let it happen right during the party? Mom's been crying all night. Liam doesn't even know how to react. Don't you think that was cruel, Nicole?" I watched the message pop up on my screen, but didn't open it right away. I made a cup of ginger tea and sat on the couch, letting the steam ease the tightness in my throat. I didn't feel joy, but I didn't feel guilty either. After about 10 minutes, I finally hit reply. Just a few lines, no need for more. "You say I was cruel? I was just at home. I didn't start the video call. I didn't call myself his boss. I didn't do anything. And if a single truth was enough to ruin the whole party, maybe that party was never built on anything solid in the first place." I hit send. I wasn't waiting for a reply. Half an hour later, my phone buzzed again. This time, it was my mom. The message was short. "I never expected you to choose this way to get back at the family." I closed my eyes and leaned back in my chair. Get back? Is that what they thought this was? I just remembered being shut out of a family event, having my role as a daughter dismissed because my job wasn't impressive enough. I remembered quietly paying dozens of bills over 2 years without a single check-in. I remembered trying so hard to be accepted, to be loved, and now I was done trying. Around 10 p.m., I got an email from Liam. "Nicole, I'm sorry I didn't know sooner. I truly respect you for your work and for the way you stayed silent today. I've never felt more ashamed, but not because of you." I read it, then replied slowly. "Liam, you don't need to apologize. Everyone is responsible for how they choose to see others. And don't worry, I never bring family matters into work, but I hope you understand now. Sometimes silence is the greatest strength." I clicked send, turned off my screen, and placed the phone face down on the table. Tomorrow, I'd still go to the office like usual. There would be reports to review, meetings to prepare for, and a world still turning outside. Only now there was one difference. Starting today, the ones who once dismissed me, finally knew who I was. And without a single shout, without any accusations, I had made them go silent. The next morning, as I walked into my office, sunlight filtered through the glass panels, casting a warm golden glow across the room. The air was calm, as if the universe had given me a few quiet minutes to breathe before the day's noise returned. I sat at my desk, powered on my computer, and opened my email as usual. In the priority inbox, there was one unread message. Sender: Liam Prescott. I clicked it. Subject: apology. And goodbye. Nicole. I don't know where to start, but after last night I couldn't sleep. I've been thinking. What happened probably shouldn't have happened in front of so many people, but at the same time, I feel a strange sense of clarity, especially about you. I'm not ashamed that you're Claire's sister. I'm ashamed that I didn't see her true self sooner. I can't stay in a relationship where basic respect doesn't exist. As of today, I'm ending things with Claire. Thank you for staying silent yesterday. And thank you for the way you lead. Quiet but strong and fair. Liam. I read it twice, then leaned back in my chair. I wasn't happy that Claire got dumped. I just felt something. Right. Like for the first time, someone outside finally saw what I'd been living with for years. The things I was told I was too sensitive about, or too cold for staying quiet about. I didn't reply. There was no need. But about 2 hours later, as I was reviewing the financial summary from the finance team, my phone lit up. A message from Claire. Nicole, I know you're busy, but please, can you talk to Liam for me? He's misunderstanding everything. I looked at the message, calm and unmoved. I didn't reply right away. Less than 5 minutes later, another message came through. You're his boss. You have influence. If you say something, he'll reconsider. I stood up and walked over to the window, gazing down at the busy street below. All those years, I had wished for just one message from Claire checking in when I was hurting, one word of encouragement when I failed. But there was nothing. And now that her relationship had crumbled, the person she turned to was me. Not to apologize, but to fix it. I returned to my desk and typed, Liam didn't leave because of anything I said. He left because of who you are. And maybe for the first time, he really saw it. Claire didn't reply immediately, but about an hour later, a new message arrived. You're right. But I really don't want to lose him. I'll change this time, please. Just this once. I didn't respond, not because I was angry, but because I was past the point of explaining. When I left the office that evening, the early spring breeze was still chilly, but the sunset cast a deep orange glow across the rooftops. I walked to the parking lot slowly, without hurry, without worry. Maybe for the first time in years, I felt light. I hadn't sought revenge. I had simply lived my truth and let the rest reveal itself. Claire had brought this ending on herself, and Liam, once dazzled by the facade of a perfect family, had finally seen the foundation beneath, the one I had lived on most of my life. That night, I played an old playlist, the kind of music that used to make me feel invisible during my early startup days. But tonight, the melodies sounded like a quiet affirmation. I had stepped out of the shadows. Not by yelling, but by standing firm. And that's what Claire, or anyone else in my family, had never seen coming. I didn't need validation anymore. I just needed to be myself and live what I truly deserve. About a week after things calmed down, on a rare Sunday afternoon when I decided not to touch my laptop, the doorbell rang. I wasn't expecting anyone, and I almost ignored it. But something made me glance through the peephole. My parents were standing at the gate. I stood still for a few seconds, letting my mind catch up with what I was seeing. My mom held a small bag, her face tired. My dad had his arms crossed, his eyes less stern than during our last call, but still carrying that usual hardness. I opened the door. Said nothing. Hi, honey. my mom said first, her voice raspy like she'd just gotten off a long flight. Can we come in and talk for a bit? I silently stepped aside to let them in. No hugs, no warm greetings, just a heavy silence stretching from the hallway to the living room. I poured some water, set down 2 glasses, and sat across from them. My mom glanced around the apartment. Simple, tidy, and completely untouched by any presence of my parents. My dad spoke first. About your mom's birthday, I said some things I shouldn't have. I stayed quiet. He looked at me, then continued, slower this time. Maybe we've been a little hard on you. Claire's been a mess since the breakup, and your mom's been crying nonstop, so we wanted to sit down and talk like a family. I still said nothing, just nodded slightly. I wanted to see where they were going with this. I was used to the long build-up before they got to what they really came for. Just as I expected, my mom jumped in right after. Well, we actually have a proposal. She hesitated, then placed the bag on the table and pulled out a printed sheet. We've thought it through. You're stable now, your job is great. If possible, we're hoping you could help us with a monthly contribution, around $2,000.00. Just enough to cover living costs, insurance, and some retirement savings. I looked up at her. $2,000 a month? My dad jumped in, as if afraid I'd misunderstand. It's not much for someone in your position. We're family, Nicole. I sat up straighter and kept my tone steady. What about Claire? My mom hesitated. She's not doing well after the breakup. She's down. Work's not going great. We can't pressure her. I let out a soft laugh, not out of bitterness, just because it was all so familiar. Claire was always the one who couldn't be pressured, and I was always the one who could handle it. I looked directly at them. If Claire agrees to contribute her part, $1,000.00 a month, I'll cover the other half. If not, I'll need a legal contract, one that clearly states when you both pass, all assets, including the house, will belong to me. Silence filled the room. My father furrowed his brow, his face flushing red. Are you seriously giving your own parents conditions? I didn't blink. Not conditions, principles. I already spent nearly $16,000.00 on this family over 2 years without anyone ever acknowledging it. If you want me to continue, then things need to be clear. My mother turned to my father, her voice starting to waver. Maybe we should talk it over? But he shot up from his seat, slamming his hand against the wooden table, making the glasses rattle. We raised her for over 20 years, and now, when we ask for a little help, she demands a contract? Unbelievable. I stayed seated, my eyes locked on him. Dad, I don't owe you. If you think raising me was some kind of investment that needs a return, we can calculate it, line by line. But I won't pay for it with silence anymore. He looked like he wanted to argue, but froze, lips pressed tight. My mother stood up and gently tugged at his arm. Let's go. I stood too, walking them to the door. No hugs, no goodbyes. When the door closed behind them, all that remained was the soft breeze drifting in from the balcony. In that stillness, I knew another chapter had ended, and this time, I was the one who wrote the final line. After that day, my parents never reached out again. No calls, no messages, no accusations, not even an apology for the outburst that had hit my home like a storm. As if every disappointment in their lives had been caused by their difficult daughter. But I wasn't surprised. I'd grown used to that kind of silence, the kind that didn't come from shame or remorse, but simply from people who don't know how to speak when they're no longer in control. I kept living my life, quiet mornings with coffee, strategic meetings that ran late into the evening, signing deals with partners who once doubted a young woman could run a biotech company. And through it all, I stopped feeling guilty. I stopped thinking I was wrong for saying no to being the backup wallet, the default caretaker, just because I could handle it. Because eventually you have to understand, love can't be measured in monthly payments. and it can't be forced through a sense of duty. If affection only exists as long as the bills are paid, then it's not family. It's a transaction. I started cutting the invisible strings that tied me to the roles they had assigned me. I no longer used a family photo as my phone wallpaper. I didn't remember Claire's birthday. I didn't mark the holidays to send a little something. I no longer hovered over guilt-ridden messages. I learned to put the period myself, instead of waiting for them to start with an apology. One day, during a team meeting, Liam, now officially our company's head of finance, walked in with an investment report. He worked with focus, professionalism, and always kept a respectful distance. We never talked about Claire, not once, and I appreciated that. Some things, when fully understood, are best left unspoken. That afternoon, as I left the office, it was drizzling. I stopped by a familiar cafe, choosing a seat by the window. On the wall was a carved wooden sign. Home is not always a place. Sometimes, it's a choice. I sat there, sipping a hot latte, reflecting on the path I'd taken. There was a time when I believed that if I just stayed quiet, gentle, and responsible enough, I would eventually be accepted. But the truth is, if you let people get used to disrespecting you, they'll start seeing your sacrifices as obligations, and your silence as agreement. I chose to stand up, not to go against my family, but to protect myself. I chose to set boundaries, not because I'm selfish, but because I finally understood. Self-worth can't be defined by someone else's pity or sudden needs. And if someone were to ask me, Nicole, do you regret not helping your parents when they needed you? My answer would be, I regret that it took me so long to realize I deserved more than that. Because real family is where you're seen as a whole person, not a wallet, not a stand-in, not the fallback plan for people who always put you last. I know my story might be hard for some people to accept. In our society, refusing family duty is often seen as ungrateful. But try stepping into my shoes, the daughter who was shut out for not being polished enough to introduce, the one who paid tens of thousands in silence and never once heard, "Are you okay?" I didn't choose family in the traditional sense. I chose myself. What about you? Do you think I was too cold? Or did I finally learn how to love myself at the right time? Share your thoughts in the comments, because sometimes your story might be the light someone else needs when they're struggling between duty and freedom. And if you've ever felt alone in your own family, believe me, you're not. Nicole's story is a powerful reminder that no one is obligated to sacrifice themselves for a relationship that only carries the label family but lacks respect. When you learn to set boundaries, choose self-love, and stop letting your kindness be taken for granted, that's not selfishness. That's growth. Nicole didn't seek revenge. She chose dignified silence to reaffirm her worth. And sometimes the firmest action is the very first step to real peace. What do you think of Nicole's choice? Was she too harsh? Or was she simply protecting herself after years of being hurt? Share your thoughts below, and don't forget to follow the channel for more deep and meaningful stories about family.